Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call to order our study session for March 12th. And ask for a roll call from the clerk, please.
Director Brett Eccles,
Here.
Vice Secretary Robert Uten,
Here.
Secretary Arthur Perry,
Here.
Vice President Arlene Schaefer,
Here.
and President Mike Schaefer.
I'm here. Thank you. Just a reminder for those of us, and we have someone who's doesn't have hearing aids yet. So if we can make sure, is that okay if I say that? So make sure everybody talks into the mic and speaks appropriate. You're welcome. You're welcome. Public comments. This is the time for persons in the audience to make comments. Mr. Mosher, I know you're okay. All right. Then we'll move to items of study, and Scott, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Item number one regarding the code enforcement monthly report. As you can notice, David is not in the audience today. He's not feeling well this morning. So, to the board's pleasure, if you mind, we can table this item for next month.
That'll be fine. Thanks. Item two, then.
Sure. I'm going to turn this over to Marissa Pereira, and she's going to introduce our speaker.
Good morning, President and members of the board. In January 2024, the district retained NBS Government Finance Group to conduct a solid waste rate study. Jeremy Tamargo, Associate Director and Project Manager with NBS, is here to provide a presentation of the study and rate recommendation. Following the presentation, Jeremy and staff are available to answer questions. I'll now turn it over to Jeremy. Jeremy, good morning. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. Thank you, Marissa, Scott, members of the board. Can you hear me okay? See, I'm going to share my screen here. Are we able to see the screen? Yeah. Okay, perfect. So I am going to provide just a brief overview of the preliminary draft rate study that's found in the agenda. And as Marissa said, I'd be happy to answer any questions at the end of the presentation. So the brief agenda for this morning, first I'm going to talk about and give an overview of the rate study methodology, and then I will get into the three specific parts of the rate study. One is the financial plan, the second is the cost of service analysis, and then the third is the actual design of the rates. And then to wrap up, I'll provide a brief timeline on the next steps, as well as I said, be available to answer any questions. So the first slides will just provide an overview of the rate study process, as well as the methodology. So why do we prepare a rate study? First and foremost, it's required in order to comply with California law, which is known as Prop 218. So that sets very specific requirements under the law of what has to be constituted in a rate study. They're typically prepared every 5 years. NBS actually crafted the last rate study back in 2019, so we're right on schedule in terms of that. And in terms of the design of customer rates, California law requires that we demonstrate what's called the cost basis of the rates. And so that is to ensure the fairness and the equity of the customer rates for the service that they're paying for, in this case, for their solid waste service. So as I talked about, there are three main components of a rate study. The first is developing a financial plan. And so that is where we determine what the sources as well as the uses of the funds are. And that gives us the basis to anticipate what type of revenue we're going to need over the projected 5-year rate period. The second piece is the cost of service analysis. So this is where we allocate those revenue requirements that we came up with in the financial plan to the various customer classes. So we use both the industry standards as well as California state law in how we determine the cost of service for the customer classes. And the third piece is what's known as rate design, in which we develop a structure in order to collect that rate revenue from each of the customer classes. The big term to know that as we walk through this presentation, as well as the report, is what's called a net revenue requirement. And so the financial plan that we put together estimates those costs that we need to recover from the customer rates. So it's a bit of a math equation. So we take the O&M costs, so what you see in the budget, we add any debt service requirements plus any capital costs. And then we subtract off any non-rate revenues. So those could be from licenses, fines, application fees, etc. And that gives us what's called a net revenue requirement. So that's on an annual basis, what level of revenue is required for the solid waste fund. The second piece when considering this, so it's not only the net revenue, but there should also be an adequate funding for your reserve levels, right? Your rainy day fund for either unexpected expenses or to utilize that cash in other ways as deemed appropriate by the staff and the board. So we just talked about financial plans. So big picture on the cost of service analysis. That is taking those costs and then we're basing that on the cost to serve each type of customer. So typically for a solid waste study, we're looking at collection costs, disposal costs, your organics costs, and then your administration costs. So once we have those 4 buckets, we then allocate those costs to each of our customer classes based on the proportional share of the criteria. The third piece is what we call rate design. So when we design the rates, how we're going to recover those revenues or from the customer classes, one of the key considerations that it has to be proportional to the cost of service. So the cost of service is how much it costs to serve each particular customer class. As I mentioned, there's not only California law, but there's been a lot of court cases surrounding those issues. And the one that we call out on this screen here is the San Juan Capistrano court decision, which really puts a lot of focus on demonstrating the cost basis of the rates. That was primarily a case related to water rates, but those basic principles are going to apply to all your rates. So some of the other key considerations when we design rates, again, we want it to be equitable, non-discriminating. Ease of understanding and administration is a key consideration in terms of the complexity of that rate design. And overall, the biggest consideration is providing that revenue stability for the fund. Finally, in terms of the objectives of the study, so the 3 key components here are ensuring that these rates cover all the operation and maintenance costs, particularly the new legal requirements regarding SB 1383 and the organics piece of that. So then the second piece is maintaining appropriate reserve funds. And then third, complying with all the legal requirements under Prop 218. So that was just the big picture overview. So now I'm going to briefly get into the details for this particular rate study. So as we talked about, the first piece was creating a financial plan, and I certainly don't want you trying to squint and see all the numbers here on the screen. We could certainly come back if there's specific questions on the financial plan, but this is just basically showing the math behind the model that we put together. If you looked at the blue line is that net revenue requirement that we talked about. And so holistically, big picture, you could see over the course of the 5-year study, those net revenue requirements are increasing. And part of that is due to the cost from the hauler. So CR&R has a 5% CPI as their maximum. So that's incorporated into the calculations. But there are also increases in terms of the operating expenses for salaries and benefits, as well as just your own general operation and maintenance activities. If you look just above that net revenue requirement in blue, that shows the surplus or deficit without the rate increases. So you could see by 26-27, the fund would be operating in a deficit without those rate increases. And those would only increase over time if rate increases were not implemented. So what we are proposing in the current 5-year rate period is an annual adjustment of 5% annually. And so that is that green dotted line that you're seeing here. And that 5% annual adjustment is in order to keep pace with the O&M expenses that you see increasing over the 5-year period. That black line shows that if the rates were not adjusted over the study period, that your revenues from the existing rates would fall below the operating expenses over the 5-year period. We also took a look at, we talked about looking at the reserve targets. And so we calculate what's a minimum reserve target, a minimum recommendation. So at the beginning of this study period, we're right at the minimum reserve. Under these 5% annual adjustments, this increases those reserve targets, or sorry, the reserve levels. Your reserve target is also going to increase since it's based on your O&M budget. But in this case, your reserve is going to increase in every 5-year of the study. That is assuming that the 5% annual increases are implemented each fiscal year. And part of the reason that this reserve number is going up is that we don't just project out for the 5-year implementation rate period. As we've seen over the projections for the 10-year and the 20-year horizon of the study, those O&M numbers are going to keep increasing in terms of the expenses. And so we recommend building a reserve that's above the minimum target as a way to potentially offset those future rate increases beyond this 5-year period. So we're talking about the 5 to 10-year period. This reserve could be used to soften those projected annual increases in the outer years of the study. Next, we get into the cost of service analysis. So I will just briefly show what we do in this level is we take those budget categories and we allocate based on the line item level detail to each of our 4 categories. So we have a category for collection, disposal, organics, and then your overhead and admin. And so we allocate those net revenue requirements amongst those 4 categories in order to do this cost of service analysis. And then what we do in order to calculate the rate recovery is we then adjust that the rate revenue based on that 5% annual increase that we talked about. So we take those functional costs. So for collection, the allocation basis is on your number of accounts. For your disposal costs, we're talking about total volume tonnage of the waste that's being generated. And then your organics and admin, you're also allocating that based on your number of accounts. So in terms of those preliminary rate results, essentially in the easiest way to think about this, your rates are your allocated costs divided by your number of accounts. And so this table here is how we calculate both for the flat rate and then that additional cart rate that we've determined we're going to keep at the $9 a month. But essentially, this is the math in terms of how we get to the proposed rate increase per account. And I will note, so we talked about a 5% annual adjustment. And so that is in terms of your net revenue requirements for the utility. In terms of 24-25, excuse me, the true up in terms of your cost of service analysis, as well as the number of customer accounts, results in a 4.7% change to the rate. Whereas in the outer 4 years of the study, years 2 through 5, it's a flat 5% increase for that flat rate. So this shows, this table here, the current rates and this is on a monthly basis. So monthly it's 24.10. And so as proposed 24.25, we're looking at 25.24. So slightly less than $1 more per month for your standard service. Increasing up to by 28.29, a maximum rate of $30.68. And then I apologize in advance. I know there are a lot of different cities on this list, but we wanted to provide the full view of your solid waste rates in Orange County. So on the left, kind of slightly less yellow color is the Costa Mesa Sanitary District current, which is at 24.10. The proposed rate that would be implemented July 1 of this year would be 25.24. So you can see that proposed adjustment is still very much in line with what the current rates are throughout the county. So this is, as of today, what the current rates are. We're presuming that most of these agencies will also be increasing their rates as of July 1 as well, but that's not incorporated into this slide here. So we're just wanting to show that this is firmly in line with what other agencies in the county are charging for their solid waste rates. So just one more slide here, just providing next steps in the process. So here, this is a preliminary draft of the report. So we are hoping to take feedback, questions, comments, incorporate that into a final report that we'll bring back to the board for approval. So that would be step 1 of approving the report and the proposed rates. At that point, then staff would be directed to send out the Prop 218 notices, which requires a 48-day noticing period as a minimum. After that minimum noticing period, there's a public hearing for the board to consider and approve the new rates. And then assuming that there's no challenge on the Prop 218 side, that we would be in line for adopting those new rates effective July 1st of this year. So with that, I thank you for your time this morning, and both myself and staff are here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy, very much. I'll kick off just a couple of quick questions. In the
Certainly.
beginning and through the presentation, you talked about customer classes.
Mhm.
We don't really have various level of classes, which everybody's the same, correct?
Yeah, so that is correct. So for this study, it is all residential customers. So for different agencies that may be broken down by cart sizes as an additional subclass within that residential class. But per direction from the staff, we are proposing to maintain that same flat rate for all customers regardless of cart size.
Okay, I appreciate that. Then the
Mhm.
second question I had is, as we develop this plan and we develop the rates, how much input do we get from our hauler? In other words, how do we know that what we're proposing is in line with what we know we're going to get charged from the hauler? And how do we accommodate last minute, or they'll come to us and say, hey, we think we need to raise your, I know we've already included the 5% for cost of living. That's already included in the proposal. But how do we accommodate changes or how much involvement does CR&R have with what we're proposing?
Yeah, so I'll comment briefly and then I'll turn it over to Scott. I think he'll probably have some additional input on that. And so in developing our financial plan, we are on the conservative side of assuming that maximum 5% CPI adjustment for the CR&R portions of the budget. And so we're assuming a maximum of that in each of the 5-year period, in order to make sure that we are conservative enough, because really what we're doing is setting ceiling. We call them ceilings, right? The maximum rates over the 5-year period. And so we want to make sure that our assumptions are conservative enough so that we're not projecting under collecting revenue, right? And so the second part of how we design the rates is we were showing that there are increases in those reserves over the 5-year period. And that reserve fund is meant to deal with any unanticipated costs or provide that buffer as necessary. But we would certainly recommend annually assessing the budget compared to what you're seeing in terms of your actuals to make sure that these rates are tracking appropriately with what you're seeing with your CR&R expenses as well as any other expenses. But I could turn it over to Scott to provide some more comment or insight as well.
Thank you, Jeremy. So Jeremy's right. So we have met with CR&R several occasions on what it's going to cost to implement the 3-cart system. So the cost, the purchase the blue cans, any kind of educate outreach, anything else that deal with the SB 1383, what those costs are. They gave us those numbers, what's going to cost, and we shared that numbers with Jeremy to make sure we capture that in the revenues. Now, as I mentioned, we in the contract, CR&R will come back to you and ask for a 5% increase, and it stipulates in the contract has to be approved by the board. And so you don't have to approve 5%. You could approve a lower amount, 3% if you want to. But we're assuming you're going to approve 5%. That's why we put the 5% in there.
But you're comfortable that that reserve amount that Jeremy's talking about will accommodate any unexpected?
Yes. Yes.
That makes me feel a little more comfortable.
I have a quick question. When we start our program with the 3 carts, are they going to have 3 separate carts to come out to the homes every day? I mean, once a week?
3 trucks, 3 separate trucks? Yeah. Yes, there'll be 3 trucks on the streets. Yes, there will be. Yeah.
Good, Brett?
Thank you, Mr. President. So I'll just throw a few questions out. The first one, I want to follow up on President Schaefer's in your comment. The 5% CPI to CR&R per contract, they have a right to ask, we have a right to deny it all or give some or blah, blah, blah. What portion, this is based on 5%, is there somewhere in there I might have missed, but if we get it, what the 5% represents in a dollar value versus the 5% increase that this is recommending?
Can you state that question again? I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah,
not sure that
so
I followed it.
right now, your report is based upon a 5% CPI increase to CR&R. Is there a number that equates to the bottom line of what that 5% looks like versus the 5% of our total rate that you're recommending to increase?
So the rate, I'm not sure if I'm catching it still, but
Alright,
this
if we pay CR&R right now $100, let's just say, each year you're assuming we're going to increase it by $5. What does that $5 represent in the bottom line for our total rate increase of 5%?
So so on the financial plan, if you're looking at the expenses, we're going to specifically be looking at occupancy, landfill, recycling, and organics are those the 4 components that are specific to the hauler agreements. And so if you're looking just at the first year in the budget, 3 million, approximately another 2 here, and then so it's a significant portion of the budget. It's almost 3/4 of your budget are going directly to that hauler agreement.
So without me busting out my old school calculator here, those say the occupancy, landfill, recycling each year. If we did the math, it'd be roughly 5% increase. Is that what I'm reading here?
Roughly, and it's not going to be exactly just
Right.
because of the adjustments on going to the 3-cart system as well. So there's some shifting of how those numbers are allocated amongst those categories. But in general, those 4 added together are what's going to be going to the hauler per the agreement.
Gotcha. And then since we're on this slide, I just had a question in general on the other revenue. It kind of went up, went down. fairly significantly, and then it stayed steady for 26, 27, 27, 28, 28, 29 of the, so what's that made up of?
So the reason for the fluctuation there was actually staff received a grant for the SP 1383 to offset some of the implementation there for those new state requirements related to the organics.
So we're showing grant money now, and then in 2 years from now, we may or may not have that. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's come out, and Caitlin could probably help me with this answer too. Other income would include grant, investments also, 3 cart, fees, the additional cart fee, the $9 fees, those are other revenues that'd be in that.
Okay, got it. And then, oh, and then a question back to, staff. The report had said you guys were looking at a tiered or a flat, but based on number of, you suggested a flat. Can you summarize why the tier, why it's not a good idea right now?
That is my goal one day, is to bring to the board a recommendation of having variable rates. Because I firmly believe trash should be treated like any other utility. The more you throw away, the more you should pay. I believe we just need to get a better handle of the inventory of what's out there. Also, we need to get a better understanding. I think we're just not there yet with the data. And so my goal is to bring this to you in the near future when we're ready. We're just not there yet.
Okay, all right. Okay, got it. And then instead of this proposed 5-year increase, is an option to look at it for the next 2 years or whatnot, since we're on a 2-year budget cycle?
You know, you did that with the wastewater, if you did 2 years, yeah, absolutely, you can do 2 year if you want to. It's just that if you do a 2 year, you know, when you do Prop 218 hearings, there's expenses to the
Right.
district with mailing and advertising. So if you do it every 2 years, it's just more expenses. That's the issue.
And actually, that leads me to my final question, I think. So if I'm just saying we do something for the next 2 years, and then 2 years from now, though, we say we're not gonna raise anything, we don't need a Prop 218 then.
Correct.
So we only need it if the rates are being raised by any.
Raised or lowered.
Yeah.
We,
Or lowered, has to
Yeah,
go to a
because we've
Prop
done that in the
18.
past. We have lowered
Okay.
the fees. You don't have to do a Prop 218 for that. It's only if you're increasing.
And so the last 5 years, we had a rate increase. But before that, if I remember correctly, there was a rate decrease a number of years ago, right?
It was stabilized for over 10 years. We never had a
Right.
rate increase for over 10 years because we were using our reserves to balance out the
Sure.
expenses. Because we don't have capital expenses. We had an abundance of capital money. I recommended to the board that we offset those expenses using the capital or reserves, and we were able to keep our rate stabilized for over 10 years, which is unheard of. I don't know of any other agencies that have stabilized their solid waste rates for over 10 years.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so,
And then Scott, if you don't mind, I would just offer too that this adopted 5-year period is setting those maximum rates for each year. And so it's up to the discretion of the board whether to adopt anything up to that maximum amount. Just because the maximum is set for a 5% increase each year, that doesn't mean that it has to be adopted. It's just that setting a ceiling in terms of the maximum rate each annual year.
yeah, but I don't know, someone said once you throw it out there, you're never clawing it back. So I'd rather see it set, but that's all I had right now.
Kind of a follow-up with the question about what's included in those extra fees. We've always talked about that extra property tax increment that we get. That would be included in that as well, or be put into that as well, right?
I thought we called that out. It might be, but we do.
Yeah, tax income is the category there on the screen there.
That tax income amount is.
Oh, yes, interest income probably, but I could double check. We have more detail in the report itself. This is just kind of the summary table here. I know there's a lot still in the summary table, so I apologize.
That's
no.
the tax income. That number looks right. That's about what we usually find on a property tax.
That's what I had thought, so, okay. Bob?
In that, on that same table, the operations and maintenance, is that the district's operations and maintenance? or,
Yes, I believe
Yeah.
that's, yes, our
so,
our overhead.
so why, I'm surprised that that would go down in future years and then come back up, but it- does that mean Marissa is going to receive less help or what?
No, I can't explain why that's, can you, Jeremy, why that number's going down, the operation maintenance?
I could look at the specific budget categories in more detail, but I don't have that right in front of me. That's just based on the adopted budgets for 23-24 and then 25-20, or sorry, 24-25. But I could find that additional detail. I just have to pull that up.
We'll bring that back in the next study session.
That'd be question. Kind of an anomaly there. Other questions? All right, then, next step for us is to have this,
So the next step is the Citizens Advisory Committee is going to review it and comment it tomorrow night. And then the next step, we take it to the board on your April 9th study session, receive some more comments and guidelines from the board. And then on April 22nd, that's when we're hoping the board will adopt the rate study and direct us to conduct a Prop 218 notice and set the public hearing. And then the board will have the public hearing on June 24th.
so remind me again on how long that, when we send out the Prop 218 postcards,
It has to be 45 days in advance.
45, I was thinking 30, but it's 45 days, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Jeremy, thank you for a thorough explanation. We certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, I really appreciate the invitation to zoom in and all the questions and the commentary. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your morning, okay?
Thanks, bud.
Jeremy?
Thanks, Marissa. Appreciate it. Okay, there's nothing else on that. We'll go to the performance review for CRNR.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Again, Marissa Pareto will be giving this report.
Good morning again, President and Board. So this morning, we're looking at the fiscal year 22-23 annual performance review for CRNR. Each year, staff conducts this performance review and rates categories on a scale of excellent, satisfactory, unsatisfactory, and not applicable. For the year in review, staff did determine that CRNR demonstrated overall satisfactory performance. There were 2 areas rated unsatisfactory in need of improvement. I'll go over a summary of the performance evaluation, and then I'm available to answer any questions that you have. For item 1, services to be provided, CRNR did demonstrate satisfactory compliance on this category. They did furnish all labor, material, and equipment to collect solid waste from our district customers. And they did transport the materials to the MRF 80 facility and Orange County landfills as required by contract. For item 2, hauler compensation, this item was also satisfactory. The district standard per unit net to hauler payment is within 10% of the county average as required by the agreement. In addition, CRNR did submit a CPI increase request in March of 2023, and the board did approve the 5% adjustment for fiscal year 23-24. For item number 3, records, reports, reviews, and audits, CRNR did receive a satisfactory rating for this item. CRNR does send monthly reports to district staff by the 7th of each month as required by contract. They provide other reports as requested. CRNR also reports a 61.14% diversion rate, which is well above the 50% required by contract. For the next item, operations, this received a rating of satisfactory with 1 item receiving an excellent rating, and that is for the contract liaison. During the review period, Senior Sustainability Manager Mike Carey continued to provide excellent customer service to the district and to our district customers. District staff continues to meet with CRNR on a regular basis to discuss ongoing issues and concerns. There is 1 item to note here, and that is for cart replacement requests. During the first quarter of the review period, those requests were taking up to 3 weeks to complete. However, for the remaining 9 months of the review period, cart replacement requests improved significantly and were completed typically within 1 week. Some other items from the operations category includes requirements for the trucks being powered by CNG and displaying district banners, which they did. The district also receives 80% of revenue generated from additional containers on a quarterly basis. CRNR does maintain office hours that exceed the requirement of the contract, and the customer service designee for the district is extremely responsive to the district and to our customers. For item 5, insurance bonds and indemnifications, this item was satisfactory or not applicable. For the period in review, contamination monitoring was not applicable since the district has not started assessing contamination processing fees yet. There was nothing to report for the other items in that category. For item 6, default and damages, this category was not applicable. Liquidated damages were not assessed during the period in review. The first assessment will be made this year, and so there was nothing to report for that, and there was nothing to report for the other items in that category. For item 7, collection schedule, this received a satisfactory review. There were 538 missed collection complaints reported during the review period. This was a 29.86% decrease in reports from the previous year, and the first time that missed pickups were trending down in 4 years. For item 8, special programs, there were 2 unsatisfactory ratings in this category. The first was for large item collection. There were significant delays experienced during the first 6 months of the program, with pickups often taking up to 4 weeks to complete. CRNR did improve collection over the last 6 months, but additional improvement was definitely needed. For community outreach programs, CRNR also received an unsatisfactory rating. Per the contract, the sustainability specialist is supposed to dedicate 20 hours per week to promoting diversion programs. There were many months where no hours were reported, and so CRNR will need to dedicate substantially more time to be in compliance with that part of the contract. Under special programs, CRNR did receive an excellent rating for the annual compost event. The district continues to be pleased with the coordination efforts and CRNR staffing the event to help us ensure that it is successful. The Christmas tree program was also greatly improved from the previous year. For the last item, miscellaneous, this category was satisfactory or not applicable. The only item to report is that we completed negotiations with CRNR and entered into the First Amendment to the agreement in January of 2023. There's nothing to report for the other items in that performance category. This concludes my overview of the performance evaluation, and I'm available to answer any questions that you have.
I have a couple of questions. What is, under item 5, oddly enough, insurance bonds, et cetera, what is CERCLA?
CERCLA, I can pull up the
Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act.
Wow.
When do you put
Yeah.
letters? So that's just,
So it's essentially a saying that the hauler agrees to indemnify, defend, and hold the district harmless for liability arising from CERCLA.
okay. And then the other thing under the insurance, and this is gonna be way more complicated than I want it to be, but we are, I assume, enlisted as an additional insured on their insurance contracts. Please do.
I would hope.
Yeah, and that simply protects us in case they get sued and we get thrown into the suit.
Well,
They should be carrying us as an additional insured because we're the contract.
we're indemnified. We are indemnified, so
And just make sure we're
Yeah.
listed as an additional insured. And as part of that additional insured agreement, there is something called a waiver of subrogation.
What?
Waiver of subrogation. That simply is the wrong word. That means that if for some reason they are sued or there's an accident or something happens and their insurance pays on their behalf, then the losing party can go back and subrogate or get made whole again from the responsible party. A waiver of subrogation says that that's on CRNR and not on us. Okay, that should be part of the additional insured agreement. I'm just curious. Those are things I think we need to have.
And and I'll make it real simple, just get their insurance cert.
Well, yeah, I don't, have you seen it? Do we get in? a
Yeah, I think
certificate?
Diana probably has it. Yes, I'm sure we have a copy of it.
That'll, if we have a certificate,
Yeah.
it'll say on the certificate, yes, CMSD is an additional insured, and yes, there's a waiver of subrogation.
And, sorry, because
No.
just going through this, actually want their forms, I can't, all the numbers you guys know, the CGO and admitted and all that stuff. Just get their insurance package and, there's 3 or 4 or 5 forms probably.
Okay, thank you very much, Bob.
You have a 1-year analysis, table in there. I've, talking to some of my neighbors, in the fall, we're going to take away one of their mixed waste carts and give them a blue cart. And one of the concerns of several neighbors is, well, I have a lot of, I need a second cart because I have a lot of things that I need to get rid of, which speaks to the large item collection. So somehow, as we do the town halls and do the advertising, we need to make people aware that if they have a lot of things that they expect to eventually go in those mixed waste carts, they should do it sooner than later, because most of that stuff is not recyclable. Most of it is trash related, probably. Anyway.
I have a question. When what Bob's talking about, how do we notify the residents that we're gonna take one of their carts away? Is it gonna be like we're doing now on the internet?
It's most likely it's gonna be mailings to them, mailing to the residents, because not everyone has the internet. So it could be door hangers, it could be just direct mail, but
Part of that, are they gonna let them know that if they want to rent that on a quarterly basis, that's okay?
yes, definitely. And town hall meetings can be helpful too. when we have
Yeah, but
town
not
hall.
everybody goes to
Right,
those town
right.
meetings, right?
And I think that should be by charts. I'm a graphic person, so somebody's got 2 mixed waste carts and an organic, 1 or 2 organic carts or whatever. We should show a picture that down below, that's going to be a blue cart and a mixed waste cart, and however many organic carts they have. People aren't going to understand. There's going to be it's such a big change in the program that I think graphics will help in what Art is talking about.
Yeah, I think we should start that as soon as possible. Because I go down my Sun Street, everybody has 2 or 3 of those big cans, and they're not gonna want to give them up. Unless they want to rent them.
They're not going to understand
They're
why
not-
they have to
yeah.
give one up.
And how many organics carts can they have? 2 big, 2? Okay.
I forgot one more thing, and then I'll turn. That contamination monitoring thing where it's non-applicable, we can expect that to start being applicable once we get the blue card out, right?
So that's something that we took to the ad hoc committee. So once we work through that whole process and determine how that will be implemented, then yes, it would be
Okay, good.
applicable.
Yeah, just one basic question. On the 2 unsatisfactory marks, the outreach and then the whatever we call it, the
large-
large item pickup. What's the recovery plan?
So staff is working with CRNR right now on the 20 hours. Our sustainability specialist has been conducting door-to-door cart audits and outreach. And so that is meeting that requirement currently, but we are working on some additional programs and outreach that they can implement to supplement that cart-to-cart outreach. And then large item collection, we have seen a significant improvement since this report was completed and since this review period. Right now, they're being completed typically within 1 to 2 weeks. So we have gotten back on track with that.
And why then the increase in duration during this reporting period?
I believe it had to do, I don't know if it was still a result of COVID staffing levels and staff being out. I think it had maybe something to do with staffing or with just an uptick in requests and not being able to keep up with demand.
Okay, but, and when you say it's gotten better, is it within the range of acceptability at this point?
It is, yeah, 1 week is definitely, as quickly as we can hope for one of these requests to be completed, and we have seen that, recently, and then up to the 2-week mark, which is still, acceptable.
Got it. All right, thank you.
You know, on that large item, mentioned it was taking 3 to 4 weeks to complete. So customer calls in and says, hey, I've got large items. Is that 3 to 4 weeks saying we will pick that up from you in 3 to 4 weeks? It's not, we're gonna pick it up on your next trash day, then it sits there for 3.
No, so that would be, they actually would schedule it for the 3rd or 4th
Okay.
week following that request.
Got it, okay. Other questions?
You classify the household hazardous waste in those large item pickup totals?
No, so that's a separate category, and that program was, has always been successful, and the pickups are completed, usually within a week.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I think we've mentioned this before. The Christmas tree thing was superlative this year. It really, they did a great job turning that around, so. Just my 2 cents worth. All right, any other questions on item 3? Thank you again, Marissa.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Item 4.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mark Esker, our district engineer, will give this report.
Is that ruler to keep Mr. Mosier away from the pavement?
Not a slide rule, is it?
Oh,
It's gonna be my pointer this morning because I was out watching stars over the weekend and I took my laser home with me and I forgot to bring it to work. So,
What were you doing? Lasering airplanes flying over us?
no, I've got a green laser and so you can actually see when you're pointing out stars and constellation and things to others that are with you. So, if we can go to the presentation and then we'll come back to this about a third of the way in. Mr. President, Honorable Board, today I'm going to talk to you or provide you an overview of our inflow from the February 4th, 5th, and 6th storm that we had. I've already provided you with the bottom line, or I call it the punch line, or the rainfall values, rainfall inflow values for our system. But I guess the question is, how do we do the calculation and what do the values mean to you, our system, and that type of thing? Next slide. Thought I would start out by just basically. All right, I'm going to start out by providing some differences about what inflow is and infiltration. Inflow is the portion of the rainfall that goes directly into our system. So, for example, manhole covers. We have pick holes in some of the manholes, and that 1-inch hole allows water to go into the system. We try to stopper those. Private property that has cleanouts that are run over by the lawnmower, broken, removed, whatever causes the damage, water can get in there. We don't see much of this here. This is courtesy of Seattle Metro or King County DNR wastewater agency, where they have, I guess they used to allow rainwater to be collected and it goes into their sewer system. They used to have a combined system in the downtown area. So I stole this slide from them. But infiltration is basically water that gets into the ground and percolates through the ground and makes its way in through cracks, broken pipes, deteriorated manholes, things like that. So that's the difference between inflow and infiltration. Basically, inflow comes directly in when it rains. It's very quick to get into our system and it ends very quickly. Infiltration, however, is slow to get into our system, but it can last a long time, and it's usually a much smaller percentage of the flow that gets in during any one day. Next slide. All right, how do we calculate the inflow into our system? This blue line is our service area. It's approximately, I'm going to say, 21 square miles. and most of it is served by gravity system, which if you want to live in a house, buy a house that's got a gravity sewer rather than pumped. But what I want to say is we don't know how much flow goes into our system because of all the various sub sewer sheds. We don't have flow meters. We don't have ways to calculate what gets into our system. So how do we do it? We have determined that you take the 4 largest sewer sheds that are pumped. So the largest being Eldon, as an example, and that is this area right here. It's the largest sewer shed, and it's our largest, coincidentally, our largest pump station. The second one is Harbor Pump Station, which is this, drops down a little bit, this area here. So this green line right here is our harbor. I should back up. Eldon Pump Station, Harbor Pump Station. This is the Harbor Sewer Shed area. It's the second largest. Mendoza, which is right in here, is the 3rd largest sewer shed area. And then Victoria, which is a small sewer shed area here, is the 4th largest sewer shed. So Eldon is about 961 acres and Victoria is 118 acres for a total of, say, 3 square miles. These 4 sub sewer sheds we use a pump station to pump the wastewater away from the local community. That's about 3 square miles in totality. So that's about 14% of our sewer shed is covered, of our service area is covered by those 4 pumping stations. So we chose them because they're the largest. We could calculate how much sewage is being pumped from those various areas.
By the way, it's
Pardon me?
It's T Winkle Park, not Twinkle Park.
T Winkle Park, sorry. T Winkle Park, you're right. I should be, but, while I got this up, we use basically the county, Orange County Public Works T Winkle rain gauge. It's located, I'm gonna say over by Dog Park or by the skate park. It's over in that area. The second one is the Delhi Channel. It's located, I'm gonna say, about where the Newport, I guess the golf course is, right there where the Autoplex, and we have a siphon that goes through that area. It's one there. The third one that I compare those to is there's a national weather rain gauge over at John Wayne Airport. And so I look at these, I look at that one. And then the fourth thing that we do is I open up Wonder Weather. And as you know, and I'll show you, Wonder Weather, they've got lots of rain gauges. Most of them are maintained by private people in their private residence. And I don't know the quality of some of those rain gauges. So I just take a look to see if there's some anomalies. But they basically use the 2 county public works rain gauges to calculate the inflow. Next slide. All right. This is an example. We've got these 2 rain gauges from the county, and this is an example of the data that we get. Basically, I could look at over a 24-hour period, how much rain did that meter get? And what you'll find is there's always differences. Sometimes this might be 1.1 and this might be 0.8 or vice versa. But what I want to do is look at those numbers, and I typically take an average of the rain intensity rainfall. Then I take the national weather rain gauge, and it provides me with a 1 hour, 3 hour, 6 hour, and I do the math, and then I compare that with the Orange County. And then again, Wonder Weather. All of these are all rain gauges throughout our service area or throughout the county. And then I can take a look at those just as a double or triple check on how much rainfall has been in our service area. And were there any, for example, was there a big rain cell that came through, and do we need to make any adjustments to the rainfall intensity that we used? Next slide. So why do we strive to minimize the inflow? So we get a rainstorm, it's raining over our service area, and I want to say that, let's say we get 1 inch of rainfall over our service area. That equates to about 400 million gallons of water. 1 inch of rain is 400 million gallons of water over our 21 miles, square mile area. And if we have 1% of that gets into our system, to do the math, I rounded up to 400 million. That's, basically 4 million gallons of water getting into our system. So 4 million divided by 400 million is 1%. So you made it easy math. So that means that 400 million gallons of water gets in our system if we have 1% I&I. 2%, it's 8 million. And then if we get 3%, it's about 12 million gallons that gets into our system. Just to compare, on an average day, we have about 10 million gallons of wastewater that goes to Orange County Sanitation District every day on an average. So if we have 3% and the rainfall, 12 million gallons, we get actually more rainfall than we transmit sewage on that particular day. Next slide. So how do I calculate the rainfall? I'm not going to go into equation. I think Director Uten probably recognizes the equation. Basically, we're saying the amount of water is equal to the intensity or rainfall times the area. And I'm not going to go into the calculation, but I ignore C because it's conservative to ignore that, because what C is how much water goes into the ground. And so I want to ignore that just to make sure that I'm being conservative on the calculation, and because it's a credit. I'll say it reduces, if I take that, it reduces the amount of inflow that we calculate. Rob Hamer started this tradition. I'm continuing it, and I agree with that we should probably ignore that. But in all actualities, whatever number we report to you, the number is actually slightly less, I'll say. Okay? Next slide. All right, can you pull up the SCADA system? You had it.
That from your studies this weekend?
Yeah, and I'm pointing out the different constellations. Okay, this is our typical SCADA. What Gina has selected is the SCADA screen for our Eldon pump station. So this is available to district staff online. And basically what I want to show you is that currently this is live. So currently this pump number 1 is on at the Eldon pump station. Pump number 2 is off. Just for fun, I'm going to say that we alternate. Typically, number 1 goes on. When it hits low level, it turns off. When it hits the high level, then number 2 comes on. That's just fun fact that how we currently operate the system. Each of these lines represents a runtime. So pump number 1, pump number 2, 2 different colors, and it shows how much runtime within this period of time. And so could you click on this and click 60 days, go down, keep going down, down, down. 60 days, hit export, and give it a second, next. This is all live, by the way, and this is real time. And then hit next, and say finish. And then what, up there, there's, open up that spreadsheet if you don't mind. Okay, well, if it doesn't open, it's okay. Pardon me? Oh, okay. So this is the Excel report. This is live time. If you want, you don't need to do this, but this is basically the timestamp, which is a computerized thing, the date. This is the 2-hour time window. 8, 10, 12, 14 is 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and then midnight. And then what I do is this is the run time in minutes or a fraction of an hour, and that's run time. And so go back to, if you can go back to my presentation. I add up basically these two columns. I end up with I export that and I put it into, I clean it up a little bit. And what I do is I turn the fraction of an hour into minutes of runtime. And then I add up pump 2, pump 1, and that gives me the total runtime for a particular station. And we know when that pump is running, the output for Eldon, as an example, is almost 4,000 gallons a minute. So then simple math is 4,000 gallons a minute times the number of minutes gives me how much flow is in that pump station. Next slide. All right, so this happens to be a hand calculation because I figured Director Rutan would appreciate that rather than me doing spreadsheets. And basically what I'm looking for is how many gallons per day at this particular Eldon pump station is during a dry weather period. And so based on a particular dry weather period, and I typically look for a week or two where it's been dry and we have no rainfall, and it tells me, hey, dry weather is 1.5 million gallons. And then next slide, please. Then what I'm doing is we calculate, of those 4 stations, we calculate how much rainfall fell over those sub areas or sewer sheds that I showed you in that very first map. And then from that, I calculate how much rainfall for that particular area. And then after that, all I do is math. I just do math. I basically will subtract from the rainfall over the Eldon pump station sewer shed. I subtract from that the extra rainfall that came into the station. And then that tells me the difference, which is additional flow or the inflow to that particular sewer shed. And then I add up the inflow from those 4 sewer sheds in order to come up with, how much water got in over traditional, and then how much from a percentage is that. So for this example, there's 700,000 gallons, and that equates to 2.4% inflow, which means that 2.4% of the rainfall got into our system. Next slide. I guess just to summarize, basically I take how much the difference in how much water is pumped, inflow versus non-inflow day, the difference into those 4 sample sewer sheds. I divide that by the amount of rainfall over the entire area, and that gives me a percentage. And here, this is an example. Basically, 2% is, our goal. So I just use that as an example. Sometimes it's closer to 1%. I'll show you for the February storm, we actually got up slightly above 3%. Next slide. All right, here's the punchline. So I've told you basically we determine the amount of rainfall over the area. We determine the extra pumping, extra time that the pumps are running, and we calculate the inflow from that. And then that gives us the percentage. So for the February 4th storm, we had 1.2% of that storm reached our system. And on the 5th, we had 2.1% of the storm water reached our system. And on the 6th, which was the heaviest day, it was 3.2% of the storm water reached our system. Now, this is interesting to me as a dumb civil engineer. I'm really excited that when I see that rainfall that particular day was about a little over ½ inch of rainfall. On the 5th was 1.6 inches of rainfall, which is actually higher, but you had less percentage of that rainfall entered our system. But on the 3rd day, which typically is the biggest amount of inflow, we had less rainfall that day, but we had more water into the system. What causes that? It's probably a little bit of contribution from the infiltration. It could be, it could be that because the ground is now saturated, more water is running off from that particular rainfall. It could be city opening up manhole covers. They don't practice that anymore, is my understanding, but there's many different reasons why, even though on the third day we had less rainfall, we had more overall get into the system. I'm going to say the biggest part of it is probably the extra water running off and not absorbing into the ground. That's that C factor. I just kind of ignore that and use that basically all the water runs off, just to be conservative. Now, why is this important? Like I said, in this, for this storm here, for the January 4th storm, we had basically 4.8 million gallons enter our system. Closer to the 2.1%, we had 8.4 million gallons of water enter our system. And on the 6th, we had 14.4 million gallons of water entering our system. And that equates to about 148% of normal, 184% of normal, and then 244% of normal, respectively, for the 3 days. That means that there is about a little over twice the amount of water we normally we transport to OC sanitation. We had about twice that for that third day. So that's a lot of flow, a lot of water. I am sort of happy that it's only 2 times. I've seen rainfalls that have created 3 and 4 times the amount of flow in systems. So I don't want to say our system's is tight, but we do have improvements to make, but we're not as bad as some public agencies are, I guess the bottom line. So that concludes my report. What questions can I answer for you now that I've given you a bunch of technical stuff?
I got a question. In the past, Orange County Sanitation District checked our flows during storms. Do they still do that?
I don't know if they have meters placed right now, but they, about 4 years ago, they had meters and they had them set for about 2 years, and their good fortune is they actually captured some storm rainfall, some rainfalls, some significant rainstorms, and that's where they got the data and were giving us the information that our system was not very tight. I will say, since that, the flow meters that they had for the Fairview trunk line that they're going to be rehabilitating and improving here shortly, they found that over time, our flows, extra flows or inflows have dropped off significantly. So significantly that instead of having 2 pipes in service, they're going to only rehabilitate one of the pipes and then abandon or remove the other pipe from service. So our agency has done pretty good at tightening up the system. So I'm pretty proud of that. Can we do more? Yes, we're doing more all the time. As we repair sewers, that's going to decrease the infiltration. As we continue to make sure we get out ahead of a rainstorm to plug up pick holes, that's going to continue to reduce. If there's flooded areas, we go through that before every rainstorm and we look at those. Sometimes we miss, and so perhaps maybe that's where some days we do a little better than others. But
Is there any positive benefit to water going down? And what I'm thinking is the system constantly, other than the rain, constantly has sewer going through it. And we know that that sewer can cause some issues with the pipes being corroded or calcium buildup. Is the fact that we have a little bit of clean water going through the system, does that provide any positive benefit?
yeah, extra flow is going to mean that there's more volume of water. That volume of water has momentum with it, and it's going to pick up the heavier stuff and push it down. The velocities are higher, so that's going to keep things in suspension and flush everything out of our system. Flush more out of our system. I will tell you, or I believe that the extra water into the system, because Orange County Sanitation and Orange County Water District have the water purification system online, all that gets captured, or most of that gets captured, and so that provides additional water source, temporarily provides additional water source. However, the downsides, as you know, it's more expensive because you need more electricity to pump the water. They need more electricity to treat the water. I mean, there's pros and cons to everything. The fact is the industry has recognized that it's better to reduce inflow if you can.
And it was interesting that Seattle has the luxury of letting clean water go into the sewer, and we do everything we can to keep it back in the ground basin. And
Well, they do too. They were, I don't know when Seattle became a city, but they had combined sewer system, much like San Francisco. So back in those days, it was common to have a combined sewer storm drain system. I know San Francisco doesn't allow that anymore. I know a lot of these municipalities are separating their systems. In 1944, we recognized that we should have a separate sanitary sewer system from the storm drain system. So we were fortunate in that we started out with separated systems.
Seattle's been a city longer than Bob's been alive, I think. Sure. No.
He's, never mind.
I had to go on tour with him. I could set him up really well.
I know you could.
He could set
You have a question, Director Rutten?
Well, no, just a comment. A big factor that is nearly impossible to figure out is, or integrate into your calculations is the pattern of rainfall. So a few days of rain, you know, the ground is saturated, and then, you know, you get more runoff. But if it rains, if the intensity of the rain varies during the day. So when the intensity is high, you get more runoff no matter what. And anyway, I appreciate your calculations.
And Director Ruten's very correct. Last year it happened and this year it happened. When you have 3 or 4 storms in a row, even though some of them might not be the belly buster storms, what we a lot of times we'll see is if the largest storm hits the 3rd or 4th storm, you really get a lot of inflow and extra flow during that last rainfall because of just what Director Rutten had mentioned.
An interesting fact to me is, you know, one year it took until October for the infiltration to stop to Orange County Sand District sewers, and that was due to the main lines, you know, in the 25 agencies. So it took almost 6 months before we saw the infiltration slowing down because of the, you know, there's a lot of factors, the perched water and the water running down and finally getting into the sewer. But
And that's exactly what happened to us last May when we were rehabilitating the Paularino siphon underneath the channel right out here in front of the Asian market. Is the perch water, groundwater was very high because of all the rain we had last year, and that really impacted our construction, and that's what happened. That's exactly what happened.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it very much. All right, let's move on to our last item, number 5. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. President. Gina Tirano will be giving this presentation.
Morning, members of the board. So we have compiled the 7 applications we received for the Citizens Advisory Committee. And today we're just presenting them to you, allowing you to review and discuss if you'd like. And then we will be asking that the board make the appointments at the board meeting this month. So we do have a total of 7 vacancies currently and exactly 7 applications, which is a great coincidence. The only thing to note is that 6 of those vacancies are for the 2024 to 2026 term, the full 2-year term, but one of the vacancies was an existing vacancy, so it's just a 1-year term, which will end 2025.
We had nobody that didn't reapply, correct?
Yeah, we did. Michael Tao.
Not really.
Michael's there. 2?
Yes, it was Daniel Baum and Annette Watson.
Okay, I forgot about Annette. Okay. Any questions for Gina on the applicants or?
So we're gonna do this at the next study session or the board
Board
meeting, this upcoming board meeting?
So we have to choose which one of these 7 gets the 1-year term?
Correct.
Not to complicate it more, but can you give us, at the board meeting, give us an idea of where these fall, you know, how we look at the different our divisions?
Districts,
Yeah.
we can. I did include it in the staff
It's on,
report here.
it's on it.
Oh,
Um,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
I went right over that. Okay.
But I wouldn't mind seeing the entire body then if these people were just to
Yeah,
get a balance.
The whole committee.
Existing
Yeah.
members, sure.
Yeah.
We can
Thank
do
you
that.
for clarifying that. Okay.
I had one.
Oh.
And have any of have these people been basically given all the requirements, attendance, things like that? So they're very well aware of the meeting schedules? Okay.
Have.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Then any comments or oral communications from anyone? Go, it's all yours.
I was just curious, did we choose each person from a district? Because I see you almost have 5 districts represented.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna do. And they're gonna show us that at the board meeting.
Oh, okay,
I think.
that's good.
All right, if there's nothing else, then I will.
Question, how many total members do we have? 12? 11.
Then if that's it, I will adjourn our September, March 12th study session and reconvene to the board meeting on March, whatever. Not to miss-
2027.
You're not gonna guess that one?
27.
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, sure.
I'm just trying to calculate out.